"Sir, she's too weak to beg," the little girl said. Then the CO looked into the trunk and froze. The words came like a ghost through the laughter and clinking glasses. Alexander Hale turned slowly, unsure if he had heard it right. The beachfront resort shimmered under golden lights, the scent of jasmine mingling with sea breeze and wine. Around him, the elite of New York sipped champagne beneath silk-draped canopies. The ocean whispered just beyond the stone terrace, but his thoughts were miles away, until the little voice pulled him back. He looked down. A girl no more than 4 years old stood barefoot on the edge of the marble stairs. Her dress was faded and torn, her cheeks hollow. She clutched a glossy event flyer in both hands, crumpled and damp from her grip. His face stared back from the flyer, smiling, polished, the CEO of Luxmeyer Resorts. "Sir?" she repeated, quieter now. "She's too weak to beg." Alexander's brows pulled together. Before he could respond, 2 security guards rushed toward them, hands already extended. "Wait," Alexander snapped, holding up a hand. "Don't touch her." The girl flinched anyway, taking a step back, but then her small hand reached out and grabbed his. Her fingers were ice cold. "Please," she whispered. "This way." He let her lead him. They cut through the garden terrace, past astonished guests and murmurs rising like wind. Down a cobblestone path behind the resort, the sounds of music and laughter faded. The girl didn't speak again. Her grip was determined, too steady for someone so small. They crossed the valet lane and slipped into the shadowed lot beyond. Here luxury vehicles gleamed beneath soft lighting, Bentleys, Teslas, foreign imports gleaming like jewels. But she led him past all of them, toward the last corner of the lot, where a rusted sedan sat half-hidden in shadow. The car was shaking, just slightly, barely enough to notice if you weren't looking. The engine was off. The rear bumper sagged. It should not have been here at all. Alexander approached the trunk, a growing tightness in his chest. "Is someone in there?" he asked, voice low. The girl nodded solemnly. She couldn't walk anymore. He hesitated, then popped the trunk, and froze. Inside lay a woman, crumpled and still. Blonde hair tangled across her face, her arms curled around herself, thin and bruised. Her lips were pale, barely parted, but her face, God, that face. His vision tunneled, the years peeled away like paper. Celeste. She had vanished 5 years ago after a supposed car accident. There had been no body, only wreckage, and her name had been written off in headlines and condolences. He had mourned her, buried her in memory, but here she was, alive and barely breathing. He reached for her instinctively, checked her pulse. It was there, faint. His voice caught in his throat. The girl whispered beside him, "She always said you were real." The guards caught up, flashlights slicing through the dark. "Sir, what?" Alexander cut them off, standing between them and the car. "Get an ambulance," he ordered. "Now!" He turned back to the woman in the trunk and gently lifted her out. She stirred, barely. Her eyelids fluttered. When she looked at him, even through the fog of pain, there was recognition. He carried her to the back seat, laid her across the cushions with as much care as he could. The girl climbed in beside her and held her hand. "She's my mama," she whispered, looking up at him with fierce, tired eyes. Alexander swallowed hard. "What's your name?" "Lily," he blinked, nodding slowly, trying to process everything, the girl, the woman, the impossible truth. "We're going to get her help," he said quietly. "I promise." As the sirens began to wail in the distance, echoing faintly over the waves, he stood there staring at the woman he had once loved more than anything in the world. Her chest rose and fell like a whisper, like hope breathing one more time. The girl beside him leaned in and said it again, softer this time, like a secret. "She's too weak to beg, but not to remember." Alexander slipped through the hospital's glass doors, Lily still clutching his hand tightly. She held onto her mother's limp hand as paramedics wheeled the gurney away. "My name is Hale," Alexander told the receptionist. "I found them near the beach. She needs help." He dismissed the paparazzi and kept reporters at bay, ensuring no one caught wind of the mysterious woman from the trunk. Within minutes, Celeste was taken into emergency care, and Lily was led to a small waiting area filled with coloring books and hot cocoa. Alexander, still in his tuxedo from the resort's grand opening, stood outside the trauma room, utterly out of place and exposed. His polished shoes echoed softly on the linoleum as he paced. He remembered 5 years ago how he had fallen in love with Celeste, an art student with golden hair and kind eyes. She had painted sunsets with the same passion she used to challenge his corporate world. She refused his father's offers to elevate her through arranged deals. She wanted real love, not contracts. The last night they spoke, her voice trembled. "I can't become someone I'm not, Alex." Hours later, her car was found overturned by the cliffs. No body, just silence. A nurse approached. "Mr. Hale, the girl is doing well, just dehydrated. She's in the children's wing." He nodded and walked over. Lily looked up from a pad of drawings. "She sings to me at night," she said. "Even when she's tired, she sings. Softly." His breath caught. Celeste had once sung to him that same lullaby, in French, while lying beside him on a rainy night in his apartment. It was how she loved, quietly, tenderly, like a whisper only he was meant to hear. "She calls you Alexi," Lily said suddenly. He stilled. "Alexi," he echoed, the nickname only Celeste had ever used. Lily nodded. "She said your name was hard to say when she missed you, but she liked it." His chest tightened. Only Celeste had ever called him that. His hands trembled. He dropped to one knee. "Why did you come to find me, Lily?" She opened her hand and showed him a wrinkled flyer. "It had your picture. I found it near the beach. I knew you could help." He swallowed hard. That flyer had been from the resort event, he remembered, discarding a few at the gate, never expecting they would reach anyone. Somehow fate had given it to this little girl. He looked into her eyes. "Thank you for trusting me." She leaned into him, tired. "Don't leave her again," she murmured. Later, Alexander stood at the nurse's station, demanding information, identification, medical records, anything. When the charge nurse hesitated, he handed over his card. "Alexander Hale, contact me if there's an issue." He returned to the quiet hallway, staring toward the room where Celeste rested. Lily's laughter had echoed through his thoughts all evening, bright and pure, impossibly so, given the horror that had led them here. And yet, her words, her eyes, even her simple sketches, they all pointed to a truth he had never dared imagine. The woman in the trunk was Celeste. Not just a ghost from his past, not just a trick of fate. She was alive. She had suffered but survived. And somehow, she had given him a daughter. He closed his eyes and whispered to the dim hallway, "I will not lose you again." Celeste woke to a sterile hum, fluorescent lights above her casting blurry halos. For a moment she thought she was still trapped, in the cell, in the darkness, where silence screamed. Panic rose in her chest. Then the smell of coffee, the cool sheet against her skin, the steady beep of monitors grounded her in something new. Then she saw him. Alexander stood near the doorway, still and silent. His eyes were wide, stunned, filled with something more than shock, remorse, grief, disbelief. Celeste flinched. "No, I know you," she rasped, voice dry. "You are not safe." Alexander stepped forward carefully. "You're safe now," he said softly. "You're home." She shook her head, tears leaking down her face. "Don't. Please, I don't know what's real." Her voice broke. For a moment their eyes locked, and recognition flickered. Her chest heaved. At the edge of the bed, Lily stirred. The girl climbed into a chair beside her mother and gently placed a small sketch pad and pencil into her trembling hand. "Draw, Mama," she whispered. "You can." Celeste looked at the pencil like it was a weapon, or a memory too painful to touch. She tried to draw, but her hand trembled, and the marks that formed were chaotic, aching. She pressed her palm against the paper, smearing the lines, unable to bear it. Later, Alexander came in carrying a tray, juice, soup, warm bread. He said nothing, just placed it beside the bed. Then he knelt with Lily on the floor, helping her draw. "A beach," Lily said, pointing to the colors. "Mama's favorite." Celeste turned her head slightly. It was a beach scene, light over waves, sun bursting from a sky of orange and gold. A place they once spoke of running to. Her throat tightened. Alexander looked at her as he drew a sun over the sea. "The sun always comes back," he murmured. That night, he fed Lily and brought juice for Celeste. When she would not take it, he held the cup steady. She sipped, slowly, cautiously, her eyes never leaving his. In the following days, Alexander made himself present, but never overbearing. He called in favors quietly, began an investigation through private contacts, asked about Eastern European trafficking routes, all under the radar. He knew the name Mr. Hale, whispered in Lily's story, and he feared the connection. He kept his father, Gregory, out of it, for now. On the third morning, Celeste saw him and Lily sharing crayons and laughter. The sight broke her. He had not recoiled from Lily, had not questioned her presence. He simply cared. She sobbed quietly into her blanket. Alexander approached, startled. Lily looked up in confusion. He gently knelt beside Celeste and offered her a spoonful of soup. At first she resisted, then her trembling hand took it. After a moment she whispered, "Did you know?" "She is your daughter." Alexander swallowed hard. "I hoped, but I never knew, until now." Celeste's eyes filled again. "I wanted to tell you," she said, "but I couldn't. I was alone." He reached for her hand. "You are not anymore." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, she let him take her hand. He held it like it was something precious. Lily curled into her mother's side, drowsy. They sat there, mother, daughter, and the man who had once lost them both. Later, Alexander stepped out quietly. He left behind a drawing, a child's hand reaching toward a rising sun. When Celeste saw it, she pulled Lily closer. "I will try again," she whispered. Down the hall, Alexander sat alone with Lily's sketchbook in his lap. Pages filled with shaky suns and seascapes lay open. The past was shattered, but something new was forming, fragile but real. Tonight, he let the weight of it settle. He had found them, and he would never let them go again. Celeste lay quietly in her hospital bed as afternoon light filtered across the floor. Alexander sat beside her, holding Lily on his lap. The air carried a fragile peace, a hollow built from exhaustion and newborn trust. At first, Celeste did not speak, eyes fixed on the ceiling. She was unsure what world she had returned to. Finally, she turned her head slowly and looked at Alexander. I am afraid," she said, voice thin. "I do not belong in your world anymore." He blinked, swallowing. "You belong here," he answered gently. "With us." She looked at her daughter, then back at him. "I was hidden in a basement in Eastern Europe. They moved me like merchandise. No name, no home. I survived only by holding your face in my mind." Lily squeezed Alexander's hand. Celeste's lips trembled. She paused, tears gathering. "In that darkness, after years, I heard them mention a name, Mr. Hale. I think it was your father." The world seemed to tilt. Alexander's knuckles whitened. He held Lily tighter. His chest tightened with dread. Finally he said quietly, "He is in my family business." Celeste winced. "I never saw the man, but when I woke each morning to darkness and fear, I whispered your name to survive." Alexander sat forward, eyes dark. "You never told me about this." He took a breath. "I want to know everything." She stared at him, torn between shame and trust. "I was moved from cell to cell, given numbers. They sold women, children. I was pregnant once, they took the child, and I never saw her." She closed her eyes. "Except Lily." She touched her daughter's hair softly. Alexander felt her grief like a weight across his heart. He gently placed his hand over hers. He cleared his throat. "I will find out who did this, no matter who." Over the next day, he asked discreet questions. He probed background files. He accessed private document stores, learned about shell charities funded in Eastern Europe. That night, he visited his childhood home, his father's mansion, under the cover of twilight. Inside, he stepped into the locked vault he had never entered as a child. He searched until he found a familiar pendant, a gold necklace with an engraved initial. He stared at it, shaken. That pendant belonged to Celeste. He remembered giving it to her once, under a willow tree on the university campus. He put it in his pocket, silent fury rising in his chest. The next morning, he returned to the hospital room. He laid the pendant on the bedside table beside Lily's newest drawing, a sun breaking through storm clouds. Celeste looked at it. Tears poured down her cheeks. "How did you—" she began. Alexander did not blink. "In your basement, did you ever see someone send money? Did they talk about donations or gifts from someone named Mr. Hale?" Celeste nodded, face white. "Yes, they called it charity, but the voices said we had price tags." He swallowed. The name hit like an accusation. He turned the pendant in his hand. Silence stretched between them until Lily curled into Celeste's arm. Alexander watched them, mother and daughter reunited at last. His heart pounded. He stood and opened the blinds to flood the room with daylight. "I want records," he said. "Bank transfers, offshore accounts, charity receipts under the name Mr. Hale. Anything connected to Luxemeyer's parent company." Celeste reached for his hand. "I'm sorry. I could not tell you until now." He squeezed her wrist. "Alive, you came back. That is enough." That evening, in his study, he pored over financial ledgers. He cross-referenced account names with charity forms and shipping logs. It was painstaking work, hours stretching to hours. Eventually, he traced millions of dollars moved from their corporate foundation account into obscure non-profits in Eastern Europe over the last 5 years, all under the name Mr. Hale, with no public disclosures. He clenched his fists. He saw the ledger entry that matched the year Celeste vanished. He stared at the timestamp and the amount, enough to fund an entire rescue operation. He leaned back, breath shallow. He realized the monstrous truth. His own father had secretly financed the trafficking rings that held Celeste. Alexander paused, chest tight. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "I will not let her suffer again." He left the ledger pages open. Next morning, he returned to Celeste's room and laid out the printed documents on her bedside tray. She read, shaking. Lily watched, her tiny fingers curled into a fist. Celeste began to cry again, not from pain, but from recognition and relief. Recognition that someone knew the truth. Relief that pain would become exposure. They sat together, Lily between them, painting with colored crayons on the tray, Alexander's protective arm around them both. The family, as fragile as new glass, glinted in the morning light. The past had scarred them, but truth had begun healing. In the gentle hush of the hospital room, Alexander vowed silently he would not rest until justice was done. The air in Gregory Hale's study smelled faintly of old leather and polished wood, the kind of room the press would someday call iconic, but tonight it felt cold. Alexander stood straight in a tailored suit, clutching a folder of evidence. Across from him, Gregory Hale, 63 and regal, regarded his son with detachment. "You summoned me," Gregory said coolly. "We must speak." Alexander's voice was firm. "You taught me the world is cruel, but you gave that cruelty direction." He opened the folder, sliding bank statements and ledger prints across the desk. "Explain this. Charitable donations under the name Mr. Hale sent to Eastern Europe at the same time my wife disappeared." Gregory's face darkened, mask slipping. Those were investments, reputation management, strategic generosity. Alexander inhaled sharply. Investments in trafficking rings, homes where women were held, children torn away. I found ledgers, Caroline's pendant in your safe. How long did you carry her identity in secret?" His father leaned back, expression cold. "The world is harsh. I intended to shield you from impurity, from scandal, from weakness transferring to our name. I did what I could to protect the company, and you protected the company by fueling darkness," Alexander said quietly. "You used your resources to manipulate innocence." Gregory rose slowly, pacing behind the desk. "Your mother came from nothing. She ruined everything I built. Celeste was everything you wanted, an artist, a savior. I removed her before she removed you." A heavy silence hit. Alexander felt his loyalty fracture. "You weaponized our power for your convenience." Gregory's jaw was rigid. "Everything I did was for this family?" Alexander stepped forward, heart pounding. "Then I am no longer your heir." He left the ledgers on the desk. "Luxmeyer is not my legacy. Justice is." His father's eyes flicked with disdain. "You would trash everything I built?" Alexander's voice didn't waver. "I would burn down privilege built on pain." That evening, Alexander returned to the hospital. He carried only a small coat and Lily's sketchbook. Celeste sat upright in her bed, pale but alert, Lily asleep on her lap. He closed the door softly. "I resigned," he said quietly. She looked up, confusion in her eyes. "What?" "I resigned from Luxmeyer," he said. "I refuse the role I was groomed for. I will expose everything if I must." He pulled Lily into his arms, brushed her dark hair. "I will work instead with foundations that actually help people like us." Tears welled in Celeste's eyes. "You are risking everything." Alexander brushed her hair gently. "Nothing matters more than truth." He handed her Lily's latest drawing. A sun breaking through storm clouds. Celeste traced the lines with trembling fingers. Lily stirred, nestled closer. "We rebuild, Lily," he said softly. "Together." It was not the confrontation of fists or fireworks. It was an earthquake of integrity. Alexander had chosen justice over legacy, vulnerability over control. He sat beside them until the night quieted, listening to Lily's breathing and Celeste's tears of relief. The scars were deep, but his father's empire was no longer worth his silence. Celeste stared out the cabin's window at a dawn shrouded in mist, tension threading every breath. Alexander sat across from her at a wooden table strewn with pencils and fresh paper. Lily slept peacefully in the bedroom. He broke the silence gently. "You do not have to return to that world of cameras and headlines." Celeste's voice trembled. "I survived in silence. I do not want a spotlight now. I fear the world seeing me will break me again." Alexander leaned forward. "I do not expect you to be the CEO's former love. I need you to be yourself, the woman I fell in love with." Her eyes glistened. "That woman no longer exists." He shook his head softly. "She never left. She just needed time." She turned away, drawing absent lines in the air. The cabin smelled of pine and early summer, a safe haven far from Luxmer's marble floors. He had brought them here after resigning, away from news vans, to heal. "Why are we here?" she asked quietly. "Because we need a place to breathe," he answered. "To figure out who we are outside the past." He handed her a pencil and paper. Lily peeked from the doorway, holding her own sketch pad with crayon drawings. "Mama, draw with me," she said shyly. Celeste hesitated, fingers trembling over the wood grain. She drew a shaky outline of horizons, half empty. Alexander began drawing beside her, gentle strokes of sky and sea. The child leaned over both of their shoulders, curious. Alexander captured Lily's small hands, then Celeste's golden hair. For the first time, Celeste realized she was not tracing pain. She was authoring light. Later, he cooked a simple dinner: soup, bread, fruit. Lily ate at the table, her careful chewing a reminder of new beginnings. Celeste watched him pour water, align food, and offer Lily second helpings. He insisted Lily choose the playlist from his phone. Gentle melodies that filled the cabin with warmth. "Why are you doing this?" Celeste asked, after Lily went to bed. Alexander paused, looking at her across the empty plate. Because the person in that hospital bed, weak, afraid, deserves tenderness, not pity. And I want to walk beside her." She swallowed. "I am terrified. I thought I might lose you again." He stood, crossed the room, and brushed a strand of her blonde hair behind her ear. His hand trembled slightly. She exhaled. "I once was pregnant," she said softly, voice raw. "But I lost the baby. I thought I wasn't worthy of love anymore." Alexander's eyes filled. "Lily told me she dreamed of a sister." "I had suspicions, and then you told me." He reached for Lily's hand, gently placing it against both their chests. "Lily is my daughter, too." She closed her eyes, tears falling. "I thought if you knew, you would leave." He stepped closer. "Instead, I stayed." His chest shook. "I want to build something real now." Tears spilled. He swept her into a trembling embrace. She pressed her head into his chest. I want that." Their lips met, soft, hesitant, and electric. A long, delicate kiss that bridged time and sorrow. The weight of loss dissolved against the promise in his arms. They pulled back slowly, foreheads touching. Alexander whispered, "I will be here, always." Celeste nodded, her eyes shining through tears. Lily padded in barefoot and yawned, watching them. She grinned and dove into her mother's lap. Celeste held her and stared at Alexander. "I think I remember how to smile again." He laid his cheek on Lily's head. "And I remember why I fell in love." The cabin's dawn light illuminated them, 3 fragile figures bound by truth. No titles, no headlines, only art, forgiveness, and the quiet love born from tragedy. Alexander stood before the boardroom table at Luxembourg's downtown headquarters, arms shaking slightly as he prepared to play the recording through the speaker system. The board members, silent and tense, watched him with guarded expressions. "This recording was given to me by a former executive assistant," he said clearly. "She served with my father on the company foundation's administration. She recorded conversations where Mr. Hale authorized donations, large transfers of funds labeled as philanthropy to shell nonprofits overseas." His finger hovered over the play button. The assistant's voice filled the room. These funds, labeled Mr. Hale Trust, were directed to community development groups. But each wire transfer coincides with disappearances reported in Eastern Europe. "We suspected trafficking." The board members' faces drained. A third voice chimed in, shaky. He knew exactly what that money was buying. The room crackled with tension. Alexander turned off the speaker. Silence thundered. He looked around, meeting the eyes of men and women he once thought allies. "I made this decision alone because I could not allow the legacy of abuse to remain hidden." News outlets exploded. Headline after headline revealed Gregory Hale's involvement in trafficking networks. The board called an emergency meeting. Alexander presented documents, bank records, and internal messages, every shred of evidence he had gathered. When he finished, he faced the board. "I hereby resign as CEO. I refuse to lead an organization built on lies. I will transfer my shares to the board and ensure a transparent transition." A collective breath exhaled around him. A board member stood, voice trembling. "This is unprecedented. We must contain the damage." Alexander looked steadily at them. "No, we must rebuild trust. I will establish a non-profit, Lily Light Foundation, dedicated to rescue, recovery, and creative empowerment for survivors like Celeste." He pointed to the door. "Please return to your duties. I will work openly with the media and law enforcement from now on." After the meeting, he did not wait for applause. He left Luxmere's offices, clutching Lily's sketchpad and Celeste's pendant. That evening, he greeted Celeste and Lily at their cabin. Celeste sat on the wooden bench, overlooking pine trees. Lily ran across the mossy ground, still excited after hearing the news on TV. Celeste stitched her lips together, eyes wary. Alexander approached slowly, hands open. "I did everything I promised." She regarded him quietly, then nodded. "You did." "Would you partner with me?" he asked. "Join Lily Light as an advisor? Help shape programs for other survivors through art?" Celeste's breath caught. She looked at Lily, then at him. "Can I draw for people again?" Her voice was husky with memory. Alexander gently brushed her hair. "I want you to teach others how to heal with creativity." She blinked, swallowed. "Yes." He slipped a small key into her hand. "This is yours now. Every design, program, gallery, your name should be on it." Her voice cracked with relief. "Thank you." Over the next weeks, they traveled to local shelters and hospitals to pilot workshops. Alexandra oversaw funding, Celeste led sketch exercises with survivors, and Lily brought warmth and laughter wherever she went. Meanwhile, Luxmere announced a full internal audit. Gregory Hale's name disappeared from the foundation page. Investigators stepped in. Legal teams worked alongside authorities. Alexander remained transparent, even as media circled the Hale mansion like vultures. One evening, after a session with survivors, Alexander and Celeste packed up art supplies under dim gallery lights. They watched as a participant hesitantly approached and offered a painting titled "Light Through the Trunk," an image of a closed car trunk shining under dawn light. Celeste nodded at Alexander quietly. "It is healing," she whispered. He took her hand gently. "Because you chose truth." Their eyes mirrored something solemn but hopeful, a bond forged through injustice and redemption. Lily tugged at their hands, dragging them to her. She grinned as they squeezed her between them. Alexander turned to Celeste, voice soft. "You helped build something real." Celeste looked at their new family, and then across at him. "And you gave me back who I was." They stood like that, three souls entwined, layered by trauma and truth, now joined by art and purpose. In the silent calm of that cabin night, Alexander finally understood. Justice was only the beginning. Love and healing were what came next. It was exactly 1 year since the night Lily tugged at his sleeve and whispered those fragile words beneath a glittering resort. Now, Alexander, Celeste, and Lily stood in a small gallery on a quiet street in Brooklyn. The air scented faintly with flowers and fresh paint. A steady hum of visitors filtered through the space, admiring the pieces under soft gallery lights. The exhibit was titled "Return from Silence." At its center stood a large painting, "The Trunk and the Light," a haunting scene of a woman seated in darkness, her fingers reaching toward a glowing trunk lid, and a small child's hand touching its edge. The shadowed figure was fragile but determined. The light poured in like hope. Lily's small outline was unmistakable at the edge of the frame. Alexander held Lily's hand, guiding her into the room. She looked up at him and then at the painting, her eyes wide with recognition. Guests whispered softly to each other as they passed. They saw not just art, but a story of escape, survival, and renewal. Some looked at Celeste and Lily standing side by side. Others saw Alexander watching them, silent pride and love in his gaze. A woman leaned in close and said to Celeste, "This is so powerful, your story. Thank you for sharing." Celeste nodded, eyes brimming. She turned to Alexander and whispered, just loud enough for Lily to hear, "Let's build a world Lily never has to escape from." He looked down at her, then at their daughter, and squeezed both their hands. Tears slipped down Celeste's cheeks, but they were tears of healing, not pain. She took a deep breath and released his hand, reaching to clasp his other one. In that gentle touch there was no pretense, no grand title, just love and acknowledgement. He was not the CEO she once thought he needed. He was the person who stayed, the person who chose truth over legacy, the man willing to love her again. Pressing his fingers between hers, she nodded and smiled. Her voice caught, and Lily tugged at her skirt, pulling her close. The guests fell silent around them, sensing the vow unfolding quietly between two people who had lost everything and chose healing instead. Then Lily ran forward and circled them, giggling softly as she marveled at the painting that held their past. Alexander crouched beside her and whispered, "Do you see the light, sweetheart?" She nodded, pointing at the glow on the canvas where her hand reached out. "That's you," he said softly. "You bring the light." Celeste watched them and felt something bloom in her chest, a freedom she thought had been buried. She turned back to her art. Children gathered to watch as she demonstrated brushstrokes and shading, guiding them gently. One little boy asked timidly, "Can you teach me to draw, Hope?" She nodded, giving him a pastel crayon. Others followed, prints and canvases early in chaos but full of intention. Alexander quietly moved behind them, gathering her coat and Lily's backpack. He stepped close, hands lingering on her shoulders. She leaned into him. No microphones, no speeches. Just the soft rustle of visitors, the low laughter of children trying new art, and the warmth of family standing together. The painting glowed, their story alive in color and light. Celeste turned to him, voice steady. "I want to teach art to kids who feel like they don't belong." He kissed her forehead gently. "Then let's make that happen." Hand in hand they stood before the trunk and the light, three figures, linked by truth and survival. Lily's hand rested in hers and his, the broken past reframed into something new. Art that heals, love that perseveres, and the promise of a world no child need flee. In that quiet, glowing gallery, they found the ending they never expected, but more importantly, the beginning of everything real again. If this story stirred something deep within you, if it reminded you of the power of love, resilience, and second chances, then we invite you to stay with us. As we share emotional, heartwarming tales like this every week, stories that heal, that inspire, that remind us all of what really matters. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories so you never miss a moment that might change your heart or your life. And if the trunk and the light moved you, please like, share, and tell us in the comments, what would you do for love that refuses to give up? Thank you for watching, and remember, every soul has a story.